this is the first time that I've told aloud.
If I could have known that you and I were alike, I would have had so much more hope.
Listening to other people's stories, you realize,
wow, these people are all experiencing the same thing that we are.
You are not the only one.
This is WMPG. I'm Dr. Ann Hallward, a psychiatrist in Portland, Maine. And this is Safe Space Radio, a show about the subjects we would struggle with less if we could talk about them more. 8 years ago, I started Safe Space Radio as a public health initiative to reduce shame. At first, we focused on the stigma of mental illness, offering courageously open stories to build empathy and to help people learn about the subjects that scare them. And then we started broadcasting conversations about racism and homophobia and immigration and more, because each of these isms works by making people feel inferior or less than, as if they deserve less. This is shame, and it's not only psychological, it's political. It affects social and economic development by dividing us from each other and silencing us. It makes us feel different and like we need to hide.
It was a 7.5-year journey, taking care of mom and dad, and happened to hear this program on the radio, and I felt normal for the first time. That I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't underreacting, that my feelings were legitimate, were normal. And that's made all the difference in going forward. It made going forward possible, really.
When we tell these kinds of stories, it begins to change the culture. One story is like someone opening that door, and then other people's voices can come through that door, and it becomes safer and safer for more and more people to live.
You know, high school is a rough time for people, so in general, any teenager, so then bringing something like gender identity or sexual orientation into the mix can make it a lot more challenging. It was shameful to have to hide it. I felt ashamed, but when I talked on Safe Space Radio, it was empowering to be able to share my story with others and hope that it could help other trans kids or just parents looking for information to help their kids transition.
So another way of thinking about this is that shame is at the heart of our suffering, and if we go to it, it's at the heart of our healing, especially if we can bring it out where it's light, where we can share it with other people, and that becomes ultimately a force for social change. I think that telling our vulnerable, silent stories is like a form of nonviolent social change and can be unstoppable.
Radio and podcasts lead to social change because they give hope that it is possible to break silence. Our listeners feel inspired to start their own conversations in their own communities, mobilizing large numbers of people to address important issues. Our series on LGBTQ teens had teenagers around the state listening with their parents while driving in the car and beginning to open up to them for the first time. Our series on women refugees inspired a group of therapists as volunteers in Maine to come together and help asylum seekers to tell their stories of trauma and to help them with their asylum applications so that they might literally come to live in a safe place.
So the series on women refugees on Safe Space Radio has brought together therapists and asylum seekers together, where they talked about difficult things that they will normally not talk about, the experience they've gone through during their sexual assaults, and it has brought knowledge to many, but also to the asylum seekers. It was a space where other people understand them and the healing process started.
I'm asking for your support to help Safe Space Radio grow into an NPR show that's available around the country and a podcast that can be translated into any language around the world for free. We'll air courageous and heartfelt stories that foster learning and empathy about difficult subjects. Most of the things that are hard to talk about affect our public health, so breaking silence is a big step toward change. Please join me in supporting this effort to contribute to a culture of health and openness.